Welcome gamers! Today we're going to take a look at Ninja Masters. This is a classic arcade martial arts fighting game from back in 1996, developed by Alpha Denshi for SNK's arcade units and for their AES home consoles. So for starters, this game was heavily overlooked and it's really not even talked about a whole lot today. And I'm kind of surprised as to why, because I actually thought this was a really well-rounded fighting game. Very responsive controls. I do have to admit the sprite layering and the graphics aren't as compelling as some of the other SNK fighting titles from the same era, but this was really a solid game. And it's definitely worth playing. And for whatever reason, critics really bashed this game back in the mid-90s, 1996 when this game first came out. They didn't like it. A lot of the game media kind of had mixed feelings about this title. One of the really unique features of this game that kind of set it apart from the other SNK fighting titles of the same era was the mix of hand-to-hand combat and weapon-based fighting maneuvers. You kind of switch between them throughout gameplay. I really like that. And this was nowhere near as laggy as titles like Art of Fighting and King of Fighters. Some of the games from those series were ultra laggy as compared to this. But for whatever reason, they took off in the arcades. This game, not so much. This was not a game that you typically saw in the arcades. You know, this was not like Samurai Showdown that was like, you know, in every mall arcade in America. But this was a really great game, you know. One of the areas that it was kind of lacking is the stages. The background scenery for the stages really wasn't all that compelling. It's pretty decent. The only part of the game that I found to really be laggy was trying to pull off the special maneuvers when your power meter is full. There's definitely some issues there. Another thing to note about this game is that it does run in MAME, but in MAME it was kind of, the graphics were really good, but the gameplay mechanics were kind of laggy. I didn't like that. I ended up recording the video using WinCalix. I thought that was a better choice. Definitely runs better in WinCalix than it does in MAME, and if you're going to give this game a shot, I would definitely recommend WinCalix over the MAME version. It's really the same, it's the same ROM, it's the same game, just emulates a lot better in WinCalix. For those of you who don't know much about WinCalix, it is a Capcom System 1 and 2 and Neo Geo emulator. Mainly, it emulates a few other odds and ends as far as arcade hardware goes, but those are generally the systems that it emulates the best and that it's the most compatible with. And so anyways, yeah, this game really definitely was a really solid game. They could have, you know, came up with something a little bit more compelling for the backgrounds, for the stages, and maybe made it a little bit easier to pull off the, you can see right now I'm in my hyper attack mode. It just basically gives you a speed up. And some of the characters in this game are a little laggy, I do have to admit. I tested out not all the characters, but about half of them. Suzuki, that's the character, he's actually the main protagonist of the game. He's one of the more responsive characters, and this was pretty typical of games back then, of fighting titles. You would have some characters, they weren't always the most well balanced. This would be one of the more balanced characters. Tenno, he's also a very good character just to play as in this game. I tested him out as well. I don't showcase, well, of course we're fighting against him, but I didn't actually play as him throughout this match. Another thing to note about Ninja Masters is that this game is super hard. It starts out pretty easy. for those of you who grew up back in the 90s and you played all these games, you probably know the titles like Samurai Showdown and Art of Fighting just completely kicked your butt right from the beginning of the game. I mean, there was no holds barred. You know, they were really challenging from the first fight on. This is a little bit different. This game starts out pretty easy, and then it starts to get super difficult the further that you get in the game. You can see these first few matches that kind of just skated through unscathed, and that doesn't happen to be the case throughout the gameplay. You get to like the 5th or 6th match, and it just gets ridiculously hard. And another thing too is that the further that you progress in the game, the more damage per hit your opponents are going to inflict. So the first like 2 or 3 matches, the infliction of damage is pretty minimal. You get to that 5th or 6th match, and then it's like 1 or 2 hits like pretty much takes off half your life. So they kind of had this this balance feature. It's basically difficulty progression as the game moves on, which is seen in a lot of games, not just fighting games. But so it's a pretty typical thing. So you do have long chain combo maneuvers in here. Not always the easiest to pull off. It depends on the character. Basically, most of the chain combos are pulled off by hitting by pressing both of the punch buttons or both of the kick buttons, and you know, pulling like a down forward, down back techniques with your joystick or analog controls. So they're pretty straightforward. The fighting maneuvers in this game are a lot easier to pull off than in games like Art of Fighting or King of Fighters. Like I said, those games are pretty laggy. It was like you had to time your inputs just right to pull them off in those games. You don't have to time just right. You just have to pull off the right combination of inputs, and they're not really timed the same way that they are in games like Art of Fighting. And so now this is starting to get difficult. Look at that. You get a couple hits and I'm practically dead. You know? I mean, he's just wrecking me. And I've already hit this guy like 10 times. So this is a tough game. This is really a tough game. It was very, very challenging. I do like how they give you a chance to kind of get into the motions of the game from the beginning rather than just completely wrecking you right from the first match. They give you a chance to, you know, become familiar with the control scheme and, you know, test out your character and figure out which fighting maneuvers work best before just completely destroying you with 2 or 3 hits like this guy's doing to me right now. He's going to hit me one more time and I'm pretty much gone. And even though I'm in hyper mode right now, I don't think I'm going to prevail. Nope. And so it was kind of strange that people were so, you know, the game media was so critical of this title. And so we're going to pick somebody different. We're going to pick Kamui or Kamai. And that's the character group that we were already fighting against. And the AI in this game is pretty damn good. I'm telling you what. I mean, the CPU definitely responds to your every movement. You can see if I try to jump at him, you know, he pulls off this sort of like a Shoryuken attack. We got like a dragon punch thing going on. I got a little bit of a launching combo there. So I mean, the graphics as far as the portrayal of the characters go were actually pretty spot on. I think that the critics were more bashing the background scenery. You can see it looks pretty boring. It's just like looks like a swamp almost, you know? Some of the stages really aren't all that compelling with their graphics. By all means, it was the typical 2D fighting game. A lot faster than titles like Samurai Showdown. Games like that were slower. You know, you really had to be more calculated with your attack maneuvers. Inputs were slower. Movements were slower. This is a lot faster. I preferred the games like this. I did like the Samurai Showdown series. Not the easiest game to play. I did a video of that like a few years ago, and I believe, yeah, we have one Samurai Showdown video. I think it's Amakusa's Revenge. And that's up on Gamerspace channel as well. This was one of the better stages. I actually like this stage. And so this guy that we're fighting, this Unzen, he kind of has the disadvantage. He's not very fast. I played as him. He's, you know, he inflicts quite a bit more damage per attack. He kind of takes on the persona of like Zangief from Street Fighter. He's slower, he's bulkier, but he's more powerful. But I kind of felt like he was a disadvantage because other characters like Kamai were a lot faster. And they can pull off a lot more hits in a lot shorter amount of time. And plus Kamai has like that knife throw attack. They all kind of have that. At least all the characters that I tested so far. They all have some sort of a throw attack. And now we're going up against Sasuke, which was the character that I played as in the beginning. And he's probably going to wreck me because, you know, we're so far into the match now. This is just where it gets ridiculously tough. Like I said, you get, you know, the 5th or 6th match or so, and it just gets incredibly difficult. But yeah, this game really should have been given more credit than what it was because, like I said, it's not laggy at all. It's fun to play. You know, it's got your standard, you know, scenario of martial arts fighting maneuvers. You have a super meter, long chain combos. I actually like this game a lot better than titles like King of Fighters or Art of Fighting. And Alpha Denshi was actually, you know, they were the same creators of World Heroes, if you remember that series. And that really was not all that compelling, I didn't think. Not as compared to this. So anyways, that is Ninja Masters. Many thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest videos. And until next time, take care.